Well, hey guys, it's definitely been a while, hasn't it? I said I would get back to this one day, and that is exactly what I am doing. This is my Twisted World. Now, I'm gonna try to keep my comments to the end. That doesn't mean I am going to uh forego them entirely during the stream if something I want to comment on happens, but I'll try to keep it till the end just so there can be, just the reading. I'll try to do that as much as I can. All right, so where we last left off, we were on part 6, Santa Barbara Endgame. So how about we get into this? This is the next part of my Twisted World. Part 6, Santa Barbara Endgame, age 19 to 22. On Saturday, June 4th, 2011, I packed up all of my most important belongings into my car, said farewell to my mother, and drove off to face my destiny in the beautiful oceanside town of Santa Barbara. It was raining as I arrived in the vicinity, and I felt a sense of ominous foreboding as I entered Isla Vista, my new home. My father met me outside my apartment. He came to help me move in. The two of us walked up to the leasing office where they gave me my new set of keys, and then one of the receptionists walked me to the apartment unit that I will be staying in for a month. I was introduced to two new housemates who would only be there for 1 week. One of them was named Artem, a quiet Russian student who went to UCSB, and the other, whose name I don't remember, was a tall blonde surfer-type boy who went to SBCC. I was annoyed at how tall and attractive he was, though I didn't show it. Okay, so I assume these are not the roommates that Elliot stabbed and killed, since he said they were going to be there for a week. Alright. After I unpacked all of my belongings, Father and I went out for a quick lunch before I said goodbye to him, and that was it. For the first time in my life, I was living independently, miles away from my parents in a new town. I felt a sudden sense of anxiety, fear, and trepidation, but I also felt a sense of hope that my life could possibly change for the better. I exchanged small talk with my new housemates, and they seemed nice enough. It was hard to believe that I was actually living in an apartment with two other college students who I didn't know until that day, especially for someone like me who has had very minimal social interaction with the other young people. It felt so odd and peculiar. I was uncertain of what to expect, and the anxiety I felt from that uncertainty was overwhelming. But I knew I had to push through this. I knew this was the major turning point of my life. My life was finally changing, and I had to do my best to make that change a positive one. Sorry, just one sec. Hey, Kate. Yeah, just figured I'd stream. Okay. The very first night was traumatic and gave me a very bad taste about everything. Through my window, I heard a lot of students partying outside, and I wondered, with a great amount of fear, how I would ever be able to join in on their fun. That was the reason I was there, after all. I didn't think I was capable of it. Later in the night, I heard a boy and a girl having sex in the apartment above me. Just knowing that other young men get to enjoy the pleasures of sex while I get none of it has always filled me with envious rage, as well as bitter hatred towards the world. But to actually hear them doing it, that was even more traumatizing. I was prepared for this, however. I had done a lot of research about college life in the town of Isla Vista, and I knew that students had a lot of sex there. What research could you have done? You know what, never mind, I don't think I want to know. I had an inkling of a suspicion that I would eventually hear or even see people doing such things if I lived in that environment. Hell, the reason I moved there was because it was a sexually active place. I myself wanted to be sexually active, but then I heard that couple above me having sex. I couldn't help feeling vile and miserable about it. I tried to calm myself down and convince myself that soon I will be doing the exact same thing. How wrong I was. You go to a place known for a lot of sexually active students, and then you complain that there's a lot of sexually active students. You kind of brought it on yourself. My first week turned out to be very unpleasant. leaving a horrific first impression of my new life in Santa Barbara. My 2 housemates were nice, but they kept inviting over this friend of theirs named Chance. He was a black boy who came over all the time. I hated his cocksure attitude. I'm sure that's a real thing, I've just never heard it phrased like that. Inevitably, a vile incident occurred between me and him. I was eating a meal in the kitchen when he came over and started bragging to my housemates about his success with girls. I couldn't stand it, so I proceeded to ask them if they were virgins. They all looked at me weirdly and said that they lost their virginity long ago. I felt so inferior, as it reminded me of how much I have missed out in life. And then this black boy named Chance said that he lost his virginity when he was only 13. In addition, he said that the girl he lost his virginity to was a blonde white girl. I was so enraged that I almost splashed him with my orange juice. Yeah, there's a stable reaction. I indignantly told him that I did not believe him, and then I went to my room to cry. I cried and cried and cried, and then I called my mother and cried to her on the phone. How could an inferior... Okay. I don't know if I can read this next part. Be able to get a white girl and not me. I am beautiful, and I am half white myself. I am descended from British aristocracy. He is Whoa! Oh my god! We're going there! We are going there! Okay, you know, I like having this channel, so I'm just gonna skip past that part. I deserve it more. I tried not to believe his foul words, but they were already said. That took a turn. Yes, it did. I tried not to believe his foul words, but they were already said, and it was hard to erase from my mind. If this is actually true, if this ugly filth was able to have sex with a blonde white girl at the age of 13 while I've had to suffer virginity all my life, then this just proves how ridiculous the female gender is. They would give themselves to this filthy scum, but they reject me? The injustice. Females truly have something mentally wrong with them. Their minds are flawed, and at this point in my life, I was beginning to see it. The more I explored my college town of Isla Vista, the more ridiculousness I witnessed. All of the hot, beautiful girls walked around with obnoxious, tough jock-type men who partied all the time and acted crazy. They should be going for intelligent gentlemen such as myself. Okay, I want to get this out of the way real quick, just in case, you know, YouTube actually does watch this instead of just sending an Autobot, like an automatic banhammer bot to come and take this down. I do not agree with a single thing that is being said here. I am literally just reading the words. This is not me saying it. This is him, okay? I just want to get that out there and make it clear. Okay. Women are sexually attracted to the wrong type of man. This is a major flaw in the very foundation of humanity. It is completely and utterly wrong in every sense of the word. As these truths fully dawned on me, I became deeply disturbed by them. Deeply disturbed, offended, and traumatized. The entitlement. Those 2 housemates moved out within a week. I was glad to see them go after that horrible incident. I was then presented with 2 new housemates who would be staying in the apartment for the rest of the month that I was there. Their names were Daniel Fainshell and Reed Mankins. Reed was a quiet Asian American student who was studying biology at UCSB, and Daniel was a heavy-set Russian student who had a witty personality. Both of them were older than me by a couple of years. Daniel was very social and talkative. He often tried to start conversations with me, which I actually liked. Social interaction was always welcome in my lonely life, and I found him to be a very interesting person. It was nice to have someone reach out to me. Soon enough, my summer session at Santa Barbara City College began. I had enrolled for 2 classes, a history class and a geography class. He was staying there and he was only a part-time student? Okay. The history class started at 8 in the morning. When my alarm rang, I enthusiastically put on one of my new shirts as I got ready to start my first day of my new college. The weather was sunny and bright as I made the drive down the 101 freeway. This was it. This was the moment of truth. My whole life has led to this. I was starting a new college in a beautiful new town. This was my fresh start to attain the life I've been craving for so long. If I am unable to make it in this opportunistic environment, then I am doomed forever. I felt a surge of confidence as I ascended the flight of stairs that led up to the main campus. For my first class, which was history, I had to cross the iconic bridge to the West Campus. I tried to feel as confident and sure of myself as possible, thinking that all of the girls I passed were attracted to my appearance. They should be. I spent a lot of time choosing out that shirt and doing my hair. When I reached the classroom, I saw some pretty girls waiting outside. My new classmates, I thought with excitement. I was a bit dismayed that they didn't pay any attention to me. They didn't even look at me. I was sure that I had an attractive appearance that day, but those girls didn't seem to notice it. Perhaps I was deluding myself. Oh, you think? As all of the students started pouring in, a group of typical popular type boys sat near me. Their overly social and obnoxious personalities offended me, and I felt like getting up and leaving. They somehow knew all of the pretty girls in the class, and it broke my heart to watch them chat up the girls. How could I compete with these popular kids? I hated them so much. I've wanted to be like them all my life, ever since elementary school, but they never accepted me. They have caused my life to be a living hell for so long. Right then, on the very first day of SBCC, I was going through the exact thing as I did at every other school I've been to. The feeling of being a lonely, unwanted outcast. That class was horrible, but I didn't want to give up so soon. I couldn't. My whole life depended on my success in Santa Barbara. I attended my geography class next. This class was much more interesting and more relaxed, but it didn't have any pretty girls in it. After lunch, I walked over to the cafeteria area, and I saw so many pretty blonde girls sitting around. I wished I had the courage to go up to them and ask one on a date, but they would have seen me as a creep. Girls are so cruel. Based off of an assumption, but alright. After I left the campus, I drove around downtown Santa Barbara to explore new areas. I went up and down State Street, the main common area of the city where everyone frequents. Countless restaurants and shops lined a magnificently designed street with wide walkways. It was absolutely beautiful. A true paradise for those who were thriving there. I can only imagine how heavenly it would be to walk with a beautiful girlfriend down the street. A boyfriend-free girl? If you know, you know. My life would be complete if I get to do that. It would be the epitome of gratifying perfection. To have a beautiful blonde girl by my side, to feel her hand clasping my own as we walk everywhere together, to feel her love. That is what I want in life. Instead, I had to watch other men experience my idea of heaven while I rot in bitter loneliness. Yeah, in case you haven't noticed, now that he's going up to, like, the present day, he's going to get, like, 10 times whinier than he was before. And he was whiny already, so, yeah. Okay, where was I? And there were a lot of young couples on State Street. The whole area was full of young people enjoying their pleasurable little lives. I saw groups of good-looking popular boys and girls gleefully walking together. It reminded me of that fateful night years ago when I walked through the Calabasas Commons and saw the same thing. And there I was, over 2 years later, still in the exact same position. It was very hard to deal with. I quickly drove back to my apartment and cried to myself, soaking my pillow in the tears of my agony. So far, Santa Barbara was not working. I dreaded how horrible it would be to continue suffering my miserable, lonely, celibate life in such a beautiful city where everyone else experienced the pleasures of sex and love. That would be the darkest hell, and that was exactly what was in store for me. Coffee. After a couple of days, I decided to drop my history class. Great. I couldn't stand watching those obnoxious popular boys talk to all of the pretty girls in the class. The girls actually liked them. I should be the one they pay attention to, but they treated me like I was invisible. I didn't want to torture myself any longer. I felt a sense of guilt as I did it, because I made a bid to make the best of my time in Santa Barbara. Once the class was dropped, I felt a sense of relief. I was still enrolled in the geography class, and it was only the summer session. I had plenty of time to make up for it. Okay, it was only the summer session. Okay, I thought he, actually started the year only taking 2 classes and dropped one of them. Okay. Pay attention, Mike. I spent the rest of my first month trying as hard as I could to put myself out in the social environment of Isla Vista. Daniel was 23 years old, so I asked him to purchase some alcohol for me, a bottle of vodka in particular. In that college town, everyone went out with at least a little alcohol in their system. I wasn't an alcoholic, but drinking alcohol always helped me with being more confident and sociable. On weekend nights, I took a few shots from my vodka bottle and set out on walks around the town, desperately hoping that I would stumble across some opportunity to make friends. I often ended up sitting alone at some cafe, hoping girls would talk to me before I sobered up. No girl ever did. Then I went back home to lie in my bed alone. No. On one such night, I got drunk enough to introduce myself to some other students who lived in the same apartment complex. They were sitting in the common area of the apartment, and I went up to their group and sat down with them. They weren't hostile towards me, and I was able to exchange some form of small talk with them. After a while, though, I ended up just sitting there awkwardly, and they eventually questioned why I was so quiet. I hated when people did that. No one ever understands the troubles of someone who suffers from social anxiety. They offered me a few beers, which I gladly accepted. I ended up getting so drunk that I completely blacked out. I stumbled back to my apartment and vomited on the floor, just like I did on that embarrassing night at Addison Altendorf's birthday party. The next morning, I didn't even remember that I vomited. Daniel informed me of what happened with an amused grin on his face. I felt so ashamed, but at least I did something more social than anything else I've done in the last few years. That was some progress, I suppose. Due to living in an entirely new environment with lots of new experiences to come with it, the first month in Santa Barbara went by very slowly. I was relieved when July arrived, and I was able to visit my home for a weekend. When I arrived back in Woodland Hills, I felt like I hadn't been there for ages. It was a pleasant feeling, as it gave me the subconscious impression that my life was finally moving forward instead of staying stagnant. When I arrived back at my mother's apartment, she was away at work and Georgia was at school. I took a moment to relax after going through so much trauma and unrest, catching up on all of the Game of Thrones episodes that I missed, including the Season 1 finale. Later that night, I met my mother and father at an upscale restaurant near Warner Center, and they both seemed very proud of me. I wasn't proud of myself as I barely met my expectations in my first month in Santa Barbara. I had an exquisite meal at the restaurant, and while there I saw a pretty girl walk in with her family. I glanced at her, and she glanced at me. I desperately wondered if she thought I was attractive, and I tried to convince myself that she was attracted to me, in an effort to feel better about myself. Whether she was attracted to me or not is a question I will never know the answer to. There was no school on the following Monday due to the 4th of July holiday. I went with my mother to the annual 4th of July party at the Lemelsons. There I saw James for the first time in a while. It felt good to see him again. He'd been ignoring me in the last couple of months, but the two of us reignited our good friendship at the party. I told him that I was now going to college in Santa Barbara, and he seemed happy for me. As I ate dinner with him, Noah, and a few of Noah's friends at a table outside, I filmed a funny video that I still have on my phone to this day. On the next morning, I made my drive back to Santa Barbara to finish the second half of my summer session. I prayed that I would have a better experience from then on. When I got back to Capri Apartments, it was time for me to transfer to my permanent apartment unit. The apartment unit that I was set to stay in for the whole year. I loaded all of my belongings into my car and said goodbye to Daniel and Reed. I enjoyed my stay with them. They made for excellent college housemates. Before I left, Daniel told me that I should come to visit in the future. My new apartment was in another Capri Apartments building. The main building was on Seville Road, in the center of Isla Vista. The other building that I was meant to stay at was on Abrigo Road, a few blocks away towards the edge of town. At first I was unsure of the location, though it was still walking distance from all the action. It was definitely quieter in that area, so that was a positive. One of the receptionists showed me to my new bedroom. The apartment unit was empty. My new housemates wouldn't be moving in until August, so I would have the whole apartment to myself for the month of July. I quite liked that. It would provide me with the comfort to settle into the place. I had no idea who my new housemates were going to be, and I was hoping that they would be people I would be friends with to help improve my social life. All of the rooms were randomly assigned at Capri Apartments, so I had no control over who I would end up with. I could only hope that they would be at least tolerable, because they were to be my housemates for the whole year. My father drove up to Santa Barbara to meet me a few days later. The two of us went to have lunch at a restaurant in the Camino Real marketplace, an area that I often frequented. When we sat down at our table, I saw a young couple sitting a few tables down the row. The sight of them enraged me to no end, especially because it was a dark-skinned Mexican guy dating a hot blonde white girl. Here we go. Again. I regarded it as a great insult to my dignity. How could a... Oh my god, come on, Elliot, work with me here. How could a Mexican guy be able to date a white blonde girl while I was still suffering as a lonely virgin? I was ashamed to be in such an inferior position in front of my father. When I saw the two of them kissing, I could barely contain my rage. I stood up in anger, and I was about to walk up to them and pour my glass of soda all over their heads. I probably would have if father wasn't there. I was seething with envious rage, and my father was there to watch it all. Why does it sound like the same thing over and over again? Because it essentially is. Let me give you a quote from the game Far Cry 3. Do you know what the definition of insanity is? It's doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again and expecting shit to change. I think that could be the moral to this entire story. One of them, anyway. Okay. I was seething with envious rage, and my father was there to watch it all. It was so humiliating. I wasn't the son I wanted to present to my father. I should be the one with the hot blonde girl, making my father proud. Instead, my father had to watch me suffer in a pathetic position. Life is so cruel to me. When I said my farewell to father before he drove home, I felt absolutely miserable. I then went back to my room and sulked for hours. Yeah, that was his problem. He expected them to come to him when he needed to put himself out there. He didn't. Another incident happened on the following day near the same location. I went to the Starbucks at the Camino Real marketplace by myself, like I usually did every morning. I ordered my coffee and sat down on one of their chairs to relax. A few moments later, when I looked up from my drink, I saw a young couple standing in line. Here we go again. The two of them were kissing passionately. The boy looked like an obnoxious punk. He was tall and wore baggy pants. The girl was a pretty blonde. They looked like they were in the throes of passionate sexual attraction to each other, rubbing their bodies together and tongue-kissing in front of everyone. I was absolutely livid with envious hatred. Okay, to be completely fair, I would be livid if I saw that too, but not for that reason, but more like a public decency reason, like, get a room. Don't do that in public. What's wrong with you? When they left the store, I followed them to their car and splashed my coffee all over them. Oh my god, he actually did it. The boy yelled at me and I quickly ran away in fear. I was panicking as I got into my car and drove off, shaking with rage-fueled excitement. I drove all the way to the Vons at the Fairview Plaza and spent 3 hours in my car trying to contain my tumultuous emotions. I had never struck back at my enemies before, and I felt a small sense of spiteful gratification for doing so. I hated them so much. Even though I splashed them with my coffee, he was still the winner. He was going home to have passionate, heavenly coitus with his beautiful girlfriend, and I was going home to my lonely room to sleep alone in my lonely bed. I had never felt so miserable and mistreated in my life. I cursed the world for condemning me to such suffering. My god, I get it. You're self-loathing, but take it to Tumblr. Such a drama queen. I wanted to do horrible things to that couple. I wanted to inflict pain on all young couples. It was around this point in my life that I realized I was capable of doing such things. I would happily do such things. I was capable of killing them, and I wanted to. I wanted to kill them slowly, to strip the skins off their flesh. They deserve it. The males deserve it for taking the females away from me, and the females deserve it for choosing the males instead of me. This reads like Chris Chan if he was like 10 times more violent about it. Ever since I was 17, I often fantasized about becoming powerful and inflicting suffering upon everyone who has wronged me in the past. But I never thought I would actually do it. At this point, after going through so much suffering and injustice, all of my innocence had been swept away. The world had been cruel to me, and it molded me to become strong enough to actually have the capability of returning that cruelness to the world. I had never been a violent person in nature, but after building up so much hatred over the years, I realized that I wouldn't hesitate to kill or even torture my hated enemies if I was given the opportunity. Again, not me saying it, YouTube. Not me saying it. Not me. Him. Him, not me. I spent the next 5 days in my room, trying to forget about the horrific experiences I had to go through, but even in my room, I couldn't escape from being reminded of my worthlessness. Every time I looked out my window to the courtyard, I saw young people socializing. Obnoxious drunk boys were chatting up pretty girls, and I wondered with great panic if they would be having sex together in the night. I often fantasized about barging into their rooms while they had sex, and slashing... Oh my god, and slashing them to death with my knife. Oh my god. I have no idea how the other one stayed up, but this one especially. Oh my god. Before I knew it, it was July 12th and the countdown on my internet homepage was up. The new Song of Ice and Fire book, A Dance with Dragons, was released. I emailed my mother to order me the book from Amazon. Why can't you just do it yourself? Whatever. The countdown was ultimately over, and I had nothing to show for it. I was still a virgin, even after a month of living in a town full of college kids who had sex all the time. I realized that I have only 12 more days as a teenager. I was going to turn 20 very soon. One of my hopes was to at least lose my virginity before my time as a teenager was over. Being a virgin at the age of 20 would make me feel very defeated. I made a bid to do everything I could to lose my virginity in those few remaining days I had. With a tremendous amount of panic, I wondered what I could possibly do. The only thing I could think of was to go out to the common areas of Isla Vista as much as possible. I had to put myself out there, even if it only increased my chances of having sex by 1%. 1% was still better than 0. For those crucial 12 days I had left as a teenager, I walked over to the center of Isla Vista every day and sat at one of the tables outside Domino's Pizza, hoping against hope that a girl would come up and talk to me. Why wouldn't they? I looked good enough, didn't I? Or did I not look good enough? Such thoughts flew through my head in frantic waves. For dinner, I always walked over to the healthy restaurants called Silver Greens. There were always hot girls there, but none of them deigned to even look at me. On every one of those nights, I walked home alone with my head down in defeat. I made no progress in school either. My geography class had no pretty girls in it, so I had no hope there. I spent a lot of time sitting in the cafeteria area, but all of the beautiful girls I saw intimidated me too much. One time as I was walking across the huge bridge that connected the two campuses, I passed by a girl I thought was pretty and said hi as we neared each other. She kept on walking and didn't even have the grace to respond to me. How dare she, that foul bitch! I felt so humiliated that I went to one of the school bathrooms, locked myself in a toilet stall, and cried for an hour. On one of my very last days as a teenager, I was sitting at my usual place in the food court outside Domino's. I saw a sight that shattered my heart to pieces. A tall, blonde, jock-type guy walked into one of the restaurants, and at his side was one of the sexiest girls I had ever seen. She was too tall and blonde. She, too, was tall and blonde. Sorry. They were both taller than me, and they kissed each other passionately. They made me feel so inferior and worthless and small. I glared at them with intense hatred as I sat by myself in my lonely misery. I could never have a girl like that. The sight was burned into my memory, and it caused a scar that will haunt me forever. When they walked away, I followed them in my car for a few minutes, and when they entered a less inhabited area, I opened my window and splashed my iced tea all over them. It was all I could do at the time, but at least it was something. Was it really something, though? What did that accomplish? At least I made some effort to fight back against the injustice. I felt sick with hatred that night. The hatred boiled inside me with burning vitriol. My summer session ended with no positive effect on my life. After I completed my final exam, on which I received the grade of a B, I drove back to my hometown feeling defeated. Shortly after, my 20th birthday finally came. Sumaya and Jazz were away in Morocco for the summer, so Father met up with me, my mother, and my sister at an upscale restaurant in Encino. My parents didn't show any concern for how miserable I felt about being a 20-year-old virgin. They treated it as if it was any normal birthday. They didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation, which annoyed me immensely. The restaurant had an all-you-can-eat buffet system, and I greatly stuffed myself that night. Delicious food was the only vice I was able to enjoy, since I was deprived of sex. I had a very fast metabolism, so I could eat as much as I wanted without getting fat. I suppose that was my one advantage. I suppose that was one advantage in my rather disadvantageous life. Fucking hell. When I got back to my mother's apartment, she let me have a bottle of wine, and I truly drank my fill. Everything's better with some wine in the belly. I spent the rest of the night pondering over what was in store for me at that point in life. I was no longer a teenager, and I'll never be able to experience having sex as a teenager. My teenage years were completely denied to me by the cruelness of women. The only way I could make up for it was if I could have an extraordinary sex life in my 20s. I would have to have a profoundly amazing decade in my 20s to compensate for all the misery I've experienced in my teens. If I fail to do that, then I have nothing to live for. Sadly, I will only experience the opposite in my early 20s, and it will destroy me. All right, now we're on to 20 years old. Hold on, I'm just going to take a quick water break. Swear to God, if the melodrama from previous parts was at like a 7, now it's up to like an 11. We having fun so far? No? Fair. That's fair. Let's keep going. 20 years old. I stayed in my hometown for a week. One of my birthday presents was a gift card to Nordstrom. I spent it on a couple of new polo shirts that made me feel a little more confident. I don't know if I would say fun. Yeah, fair. Buying new clothes would always give me a temporary boost of confidence, and I practiced it as if it was a drug. Before I left for Santa Barbara, I reunited with Philip and Addison after a very long period of not seeing them. The three of us met up at the Calabasas Commons, and then we went in Philip's car to Malibu for a few adventures. We ended up settling down at Starbucks and had a few insightful conversations. Addison has changed and matured tremendously, and he was no longer associated with the popular Malibu high school kids. This didn't change my resentment towards him, and I kept confronting him the whole time about the insulting way he treated me over a year ago. After a lot of debating, we agreed to resolve our conflict with each other. This didn't mean I forgot all the slights he dealt to me in the past, however. I never forget, I never forgive. Who is he, anonymous? One day I'll show him how superior I am. On the day after I saw Philip and Addison, I went over to James's house. I hadn't been there for ages, and the two of us relived our traditional walks around the Palisades town center, just like old times. It felt strange and nostalgic to experience it after so long, especially after going through so many changes in Santa Barbara. I told James about my turmoil of being a 20-year-old virgin, and my desperate hope that things will get better once I start my autumn semester at my new college. I talked about all the beautiful blonde girls I saw walking around my college, and my deep wish that I will one day have one as a girlfriend. James sympathized with me greatly, for he was also going through similar troubles in life. He seemed glad that I was finally taking some steps to bring changes to my life. Are you really, though? Because it seems like you're just doing the same shit over and over again. I drove back to Santa Barbara in a slightly better mood than I was in when I left it. I had a month until the new semester started, and I could use that time to prepare and recuperate. My new housemates were meant to move into the second bedroom of my apartment on August 5th. I had an anxious feeling of anticipation for what they will be like. August 5th came quickly, and I prepared myself to be in a pleasant mood to meet them. Their names were Ryan and Angel, and to my dismay, they were of Hispanic race. What do you have against Hispanic people? What did they do to you? Oh my God, Elliot. In addition, the two of them were already friends with each other, which meant they could possibly gang up against me if any conflicts were to arise. They also seemed like rowdy, low-class types. My first impression of them soured me, but I tried to be pleasant and not show it. The two of them acted cordial to me on the first day, but after observing them for a bit, I had a bad feeling that they would be trouble to live with. And they were to be my housemates for a whole year. When I was alone in my room, I panicked to myself at how dire a situation this was. This was extremely disappointing. I was hoping I would get decent, mature, clean-cut housemates. Instead, I got low-class scum. Geez, what's the weather like up there on your high horse, Elliot? On the second day, they started inviting their equally rowdy friends into my apartment, and we exchanged more small talk. To my indignant surprise, they asked me the question I always dreaded answering. Are you a virgin? I admitted that I was. I always admitted the truth about this. It was my life's struggle, and I couldn't lie about such a thing. They then had the audacity to tell me that they lost their virginity long ago, bragging about all the girls they slept with. I particularly hated Angel because of his ugly pig face. How could such an ugly animal had sexual experiences with girls, and yet I haven't? It's almost as if it's not just skin deep and looks aren't everything. How could such an ugly animal have had sexual experiences with girls, and yet I haven't? What was wrong with this world? I got so angry that I went to my room and punched the wall! They heard me and started laughing. It was almost a repeat of what I experienced with that black boy named Chance in the old apartment, except this time it was worse because these were my housemates for the year. On the day after, I almost got into a physical fight with Angel. The ugly pig kept acting as if girls thought he was more attractive than me. Ha! I'm a beautiful, magnificent gentleman, and he's a low-class, pig-faced thug. Yes, because gentlemen always throw drinks on people that they don't like, on people that they're jealous of, all the time, buddy. Yeah. I had enough of his cocksure attitude, and I started to call him exactly what he was. I tried to insult him as much as I could, telling him how superior I am to him, and saying that he was a low class. He tried to attack me, but Ryan, being the more mellow of the two, held him back. A pity. I was itching for a chance to hurt that obnoxious little animal. Though I suppose it was for the best. My life was too important to risk doing anything rash. In a panic, I immediately called my mother as soon as I could and told her of the dire situation. There was no way I could live with these two imbeciles for a whole college year. They already ruined my weekend. My mother agreed that I needed to get out of there, so I went to the leasing office and explained to the manager everything that happened. He told me that there was another room available for me to transfer to, but it would cost $100 more a month, because it was a larger 2-bedroom unit, and I would only be sharing it with one housemate, who would occupy the other room. I called my mother and she gave me permission to go through with it. I signed the new lease, arranging to transfer when the room became available in September. I would have to bear living with them for the rest of the month until then. To help get through the month, my mother let me come home every weekend until I was able to transfer to the new apartment. I would only stay in Santa Barbara during the weekdays, but on those weekdays, Angel and Ryan went out of their way to make my life a living hell. Every time they went out, they kept yelling to me how they were going to sleep with hot girls that night. I knew they were just lying to make me jealous. They always made fun of me for being a virgin. At night, they frequently made noise to wake me up. I was literally being bullied, and it was truly horrific. I wanted to kill them both, but of course I was smart enough not to go through with that desire. All I could do was remember every single insult, so I can get revenge in a more efficient way in the future. That is who I am. I don't act stupidly or rashly. Really? I know... Yeah, there's a punk out there with coffee dumped on his car who would say otherwise, but alright. I remember every insult, and I wait until the time is right to strike. When that time comes, I will crush all of my enemies in the most devastating and catastrophic way possible, and the results will be beautiful. On one of the weekends in which I went home during August, my mother moved out of the Versailles apartment complex and moved into Summit Townhomes near Warner Center. It was an abrupt decision to move there. I helped her pack everything and watched as the movers transported all of our belongings to the new place. The Summit was much nicer looking than her old apartment. I'll say that for it. It was a townhome with an upstairs room that I would occupy whenever I visit home. I was glad that she moved to a better place, but I would have much rather she got married to a wealthy man and moved into his mansion. Even though she was no longer seeing Jack, she dated other men of high class. She had a special way of charming them. Oh, I bet she does, I bet she does. Say no more, say no more. I continued to pester her to get married so that I can be a part of an upper-class family and enjoy all the benefits that would come with that, but she always refused, claiming that she never wants to get married due to her unpleasant experiences with my father. I told her that she should suffer through any negative aspects of marriage just for my sake, because it would completely save my life, but she still refused. Mommy, can you please be a gold digger? It would make my life better. Jesus Christ. Is this Elliot Rodger or Greg Heffley? Oh my God, the self-centeredness of it all. It's so funny. It's so funny. I went over to James's house during my visit home. The two of us chatted online a lot, and when I told him that I was in town, he seemed eager to see me. I was eager to see him too, as he was my closest friend and I had a lot to talk to him about. I drove up Topanga Canyon to his house, not knowing that it will be the last time I ever visit him. The two of us did what we usually did. We walked out to the Palisades Bluffs, where we discussed our hopes and dreams. We then went to the Palisades Town Center to have dinner. This time we chose to eat at Panda Express. While we were eating, some high school kids walked in. James saw them first, and right when he saw them, he said the words, "We're fucked." James knew I would have trouble with them. Okay, so even his friend is like, oh God, Elliot's gonna spurg out now. They were popular boys who had a flock of pretty girls with them. One of them sat down with two of the girls, putting his leg up on another chair with a cocky smirk on his face. I was livid with rage, and I wanted to pour my drink all over his head. But he doesn't act rational. He doesn't act rashly, you guys. James knew exactly what I was planning to do. We had been through similar incidents before. He made a lot of effort to try to dissuade me from acting on my anger, pointing out that there was a security guard nearby. I did the only other thing I could do. I packed up my dinner and left the restaurant, fleeing in defeat and shame. James soon followed, and we decided to finish our meal at his house. A dark and ominous aura clouded over our friendship that day. When the two of us got back to James's house, I was still seething with rage. I didn't understand why James wasn't angry like me, because he's not a sociopath. The sight that we just witnessed was horrible to watch. To see another male be successful with females is torture for males like us who have no success with females. I was so angry that I told James of all of the acts of revenge I wanted to exact on those popular boys. Oh boy, great decision. I told him my desire to flay them alive, to strip the skins off their flesh and make them scream in agony as punishment for living a better life than me. James became deeply disturbed by my anger. I can't imagine why. I wished that he wasn't disturbed. I wished that he could be a friend that felt the same way about the world that I did. But he wasn't that kind of person. He was a weakling. One way of putting it, but okay. Once I had calmed down, the two of us had a long conversation in his room, and I ended up crying in front of him as I explained how hopeless I felt about life. Soon after that, I left his house, never to return there again. He will never invite me over after that incident, and our friendship will slowly fade to dust. Again, I can't imagine why. During the last few days that I had to endure living with those barbaric housemates, I often walked out to Isla Vista hoping I could meet a girl and take her home with me. I wanted to prove to them all that girls liked me, to see the look on their faces when they see a girl by my side. But of course I had nothing to prove because girls didn't like me. Every time I tried to go out and meet a girl, I ended up walking home alone in anger. On one of these nights, I crossed paths with a boy who was walking with two pretty girls. I got so envious that I cursed at them, and then I followed them for a few minutes. They just laughed at me, and one of the girls kissed the boy on the lips. I'm assuming she was his girlfriend. That was one of the worst experiences of torture from girls that I've had to endure, and it will be a scar in my memory forever, to remind me that girls think I'm unworthy compared to other boys. I ran home with tears pouring down my cheeks, hoping that my horrible housemates wouldn't be there to witness my shame. I tried to spark a positive attitude on the first day of my autumn semester at Santa Barbara City College. I was registered for 3 classes: history, astronomy, and math. Okay, so he's still not a full-time student. Dang. My history and astronomy classes were in the morning, and my math class was late in the afternoon. So on school days, I had to spend the entire day at the college. I figured this would be beneficial, because it would keep me out of my room and in a place where possible opportunities might come my way. Well, I guess I got to take into account that there's colleges that do things differently. Like, I'm going off of my own experiences with college here. So take any comment I made like that with a grain of salt, I guess, because I'm not going to act like I know anything about any other experience but my own when it comes to these college things. Maybe it's different. Maybe the system's different. Maybe it's not. But I'm rambling. Sorry. My history and astronomy classes were in the morning and my math class was late in the afternoon, so on school days I had to spend the entire day at the college. I figured this would be beneficial because it would keep me out of my room and in a place where possible opportunities might come my way. I had to wait a couple of hours before my math class started, and I spent those hours roaming around the college or sitting in the library, looking at all the hot girls and wishing I could have one as a girlfriend. I was like a starving man surrounded by a feast that I was prohibited to eat. All of my classes left me feeling hopeless and depressed. Not only was I unable to meet any girls, and there were a lot of pretty ones, but I also had a hard time making any friends. I've always had a hard time making friends. I'm not the type of person that can fit in with a group of outgoing people. The last time I did such a thing was when I was 12. I had to make friends. Having a social circle will provide me with more opportunities to meet girls, and it was the only way to get invited to all those exciting college parties. But no one even wanted to be my friend. I actually tried to initiate small talk with guys who sat next to me, but it never went far. I had a horrible feeling that I was in for a very miserable time in Santa Barbara. I did make one friend through spending time in my apartment's courtyard. This friend's name was Andy Chan. He was a foreign student from China. Andy shared the same eagerness as I did to experience college life in Isla Vista to the fullest, and unlike most people my age, I found him to have some intelligence and substance. The two of us walked out to Del Playa Street in Isla Vista a few times, the place where all the parties happened, but nothing ever came of it. I still felt like an outcast, even though I had even though I had a friend with me, and I still felt inferior compared to all of those guys who walked around with beautiful girls. Blah. Water break. On September 5th, I was finally able to move into my new permanent apartment unit. I felt relieved that I would never have to deal with the likes of Ryan and Angel ever again, though I did worry that I will eventually run into them again because my new unit was still in the same apartment complex. Once I was given the keys, I quickly transported all of my belongings to the new place. I was supposed to have only one housemate who would live in the other room of the unit, but he hadn't moved in yet. I had no idea who my new housemate would be, but I was told that he was an older student who attended the university. Did I miss the chance section? You did. Yeah. Yeah, that was some spicy stuff. Oh my god. That knowledge made me feel assured that he would be tolerable to live with. He was set to arrive in 2 weeks, so I had the place to myself until then. I unpacked all of my things and set up my new room. Once I was done, I looked at it and thought to myself that this was it. This was my new living place in the college town of Isla Vista, and if I could finally have the life I wanted, then this may well be the room where I lose my virginity. How wrong I was. It would only be another room where I suffer miserable loneliness. No girl will ever step foot in it. Santa Barbara was not going well for me. I was already months into my 20th year, and I had nothing to show for it. As I spent the first weeks of September in my new room, all alone, I fully realized how much I was failing at life. Santa Barbara was supposed to be a place of hope. A place where I could start a new, happy life. I couldn't believe how wrong everything was turning out. Instead of finally getting a chance to live a life of sex and love like other young people did, I only experienced worse rejection and humiliation than I had ever experienced before. This was unbelievable and unforgivable. If humanity continued to insult me with such cruelty, then there was really no hope for happiness in my life. And I made a D&D villain based off of Elliot. Players nicknamed him Pee Pee Poo Poo Man because he sprayed orange juice and pee on people. That's great, man. That's great. At Santa Barbara City College, I had exactly the same experience that I had at Moore Park. I had to watch beautiful young people enjoying their lives together as I languished in loneliness and despair. Because no one accepted me. I dropped my math class. I just couldn't bear having to be at the college all day long, sitting in the library watching couples kiss each other. I retained my 2 morning classes only because there was some small inkling of desperate hope inside of me. He wrote home, but I guess he meant hope. He does know that he doesn't have to hang out in the library, right? My usual day went as follows. I woke up alone in my bed with no girl beside me and did a few minutes of exercise before I showered and got ready for college. I then drove to Starbucks to have my morning latte and felt envious whenever I saw a young couple there. I would then attend my 2 classes where no one said a word to me, having to endure the torment of watching other guys talking to the girls I liked, and then I would go home alone, open the door to my lonely room, and feel absolutely miserable. The loneliness was suffocating. I could barely breathe. If only one pretty girl had at least given me a chance and tried to get to know me, everything would have turned out differently, but girls continued to treat me with disdain. They didn't treat you with disdain, Elliot. They treated you with indifference because you never came up to them. You didn't exist to them because you didn't try to exist to them. Not everything's going to be handed to you, but I guess it's kind of pointless trying to lecture him because he's kind of fucking worm food right now. The loneliness was torturing me so intensely that I even started up my WoW account and played the game constantly for the month of September. James still played WoW, and the two of us played together online for a few days, but he treated me very coldly the whole time. I could tell that the kind of friendship we had for so many years no longer existed. That last incident in the Palisades stabbed our friendship deeply, and it was in the process of bleeding away. At the time, I felt offended by his attitude towards me, so I called him out on it. This sparked another long argument between us that resulted in James refusing to talk to me online anymore. A few days after that, I deactivated my account again. My new housemate arrived in the middle of September. His name was Spencer Horowitz, a short, chubby UCSB student who was about a year older than me. He seemed like a friendly, mature sort of person. Definitely a pleasant contrast from the housemates I had to suffer through in the previous month. I didn't expect to have any problems with him. However, I was disappointed due to the fact that... Okay, Mario. Due to the fact that I was hoping my new housemate would be someone I could relate to. Someone who could be my friend and help me integrate with the social life in Santa Barbara. I didn't see Spencer as the type of person I would become friends with. We could get along, but we had nothing in common. In addition, I was a bit shocked when Spencer told me that he used to have a girlfriend. It was a casual comment that came out of a conversation we had. I didn't understand how a chubby and unattractive guy like Spencer would have been able to get a girlfriend, while I've never had the chance to. This guy was 3 inches shorter than me, and even I am considered short for my age. I could not fathom how such a thing was possible, and I concluded to myself that his former girlfriend of his that he mentioned must have been as unattractive as he was. There was no need for me to be jealous. Oh my god. Huffing industrial-grade copium. After a few weeks of living with him, I realized that I had a psychological problem with his presence in my apartment. Even though there was no trouble between us, I hated having someone constantly in my vicinity to judge how pathetic my life was. I could hide the details of my lonely celibate life from the rest of the world, but I could not hide it from Spencer. The fact that I had never had any girls over to my room was clear enough that I was an undesirable outcast, and I hated it when people knew this about me and judged me for it. Spencer was there to witness it all, and I would eventually come to hate him just because of that. During the months of October and November, I made another desperate bid to improve my social life as best as I could. I failed in making any friends in my 2 college classes. I didn't have any interactions with girls at my school. I was an invisible ghost just like I had always been. I continued to see Andy, the one friend that I made. We often met up to have dinner at a restaurant somewhere. He soon introduced me to a few friends of his. One of them was named Stan, a European from Holland, whom I particularly got along with. I enjoyed having conversations with Stan about a wide variety of subjects, including politics, history, business, and architecture. I wisely refrained from revealing any of my political views, of which disturbed most people. I bet, Elliot, I bet. During the month of October, I went out with Andy, Stan, and some of their friends quite often. We did things like walk around State Street or Isla Vista, or went to the movie theaters together. I soon found that even having these few acquaintances to hang out with didn't make me feel any better. I still felt inferior when I saw other guys walking with beautiful girls. At the movie theaters, I felt just as pathetic about walking in there with a group of friends as I did years ago when I went to the movies with my parents. It was that pathetic feeling of not having a hot girlfriend on my arm while some other boys in the theater did. What I truly wanted, what I truly needed, was a girlfriend. I needed a girl's love. I needed to feel worthy as a male. For so long, I have felt worthless, and it's all girls' fault. Okay. No girl wanted to be my girlfriend. Halloween weekend in the college town of Isla Vista is a renowned event. Young people pour in from all over the country to attend the raucous parties there. My experience during this weekend is just what one would have expected it to be, a miserable disaster. When I was a child, I used to love Halloween. It was a holiday of fun and excitement where I went trick-or-treating, going from house to house collecting candy with my friends and family. For young adults, Halloween is a very different sort of holiday, of which one is supposed to dress up in sexually explicit costumes, attend wild drinking parties, and have sexual experiences with girls. For other young people who are able to do such things, Halloween must be a blast. But I am unable to do such things. I wasn't invited to any party, and girls don't want to have sex with me. As a teenager and a young adult, Halloween has been a holiday of torment and depression because of this. In Isla Vista, this was greatly intensified. Well, here's a tip for solving one of those problems. Step 1, walk up to a frat party. Step 2, have a case of beer in hand. Step 3, 90% chance you get in and, profit. There you go. I tried my best to put myself out there on the Halloween weekend. I made many laps around Isla Vista trying to bolster up the courage to talk to a girl or walk into a party, but I just couldn't. I knew they would all reject me. What I saw during those walks shook me to the very core. Girls dressed up in extremely revealing outfits, and the sight of them filled my sex-starved self with hunger and desire that I knew I could never quench. On the night of the Halloween weekend, I went out there with Andy and Stan and a few others. It made absolutely no difference. We didn't get into any parties, and I just walked around the streets like losers. Being friends with them wasn't benefiting me at all. If only I had a beautiful girlfriend to experience such an event with. I would have even dressed up in a costume with her. It would have been so blissful and euphoric to walk around in all of that excitement with a beautiful girl on my arm, to attend every single party because anyone would admit a beautiful girl into it, to make passionate love to her in my room at the end of the night, to snuggle next to her sexy warm body as we drift off to sleep together. That is the life I should have lived. So many other guys are able to experience that, and just thinking about it filled me with extreme agony. Life is not fair. In November, my brief friendship with Andy, Stan, and their group faded away. I often saw on Facebook that they did things together without even inviting me, which is the same thing I've had to experience with other groups of friends that I've had in the past. I was always an outcast, even among people I knew. I grew tired of their lack of consideration for me, so I stopped calling them. They weren't even popular anyway, and I wasn't benefiting at all from their friendship. I still continued to meet with Andy at restaurants on occasion, however. Every day that I spent at my college, the more inferior and invisible I felt. I felt like such an inferior mouse whenever I saw guys walking with beautiful girls. I hated having to endure it, but I had already worked so hard on my 2 classes that I couldn't just quit then. The only way that I could gain a boost into my self-esteem was to buy better-looking clothes. My mother gave me a few more gift cards to Nordstrom, and I spent them on $200 designer jeans. When I wore these to school, I saw that I was wearing better jeans than most other guys, and that made me have a slightly higher sense of self-worth. I also bought a few more shirts and a pair of new Hugo Boss sneakers. Doing this started a new obsession for me. I became more and more obsessed with my appearance. Because my mother, father, and grandmother constantly paid me extra money now that I was living in Santa Barbara, I had saved up enough to indulge in this obsession. Familiarizing myself with all the top designer brands, I bought new clothes every time I visited my hometown. My favorite brands were Hugo Boss and Armani. I always stopped by the Camarillo shopping center on my way back to Santa Barbara. I loved it there. They had a store for almost every brand. One time, as I was shopping in the Calvin Klein store in Camarillo, I saw such a sexy-looking blonde girl with perfectly tanned skin. She looked so beautiful and sexy that I had an erection instantly. $200 on jeans, that's too much. Yeah. Hell, I spent $20 on mine, and I think that's too much, so yeah, preaching to the choir. Oh, the heavenly things I wanted to do to her. Then I saw her hunk of a boyfriend. My entire being was filled with anguish and despair. I could only imagine how amazing and pleasurable that guy's life was. They were older than me, probably mid-20s, and I thought with desperate hope that when I'm that man's age, I would be worthy enough to have such a girlfriend by my side, to shop with her at that same shopping mall in heavenly bliss. My life was a life of starvation and yearning. I visited home for Thanksgiving and went with my mother to Rob Lemelson's house for a small Thanksgiving get-together. James was there, and the last time I spoke to him since then was when we had our bitter argument online. The one person who has been my friend through all of my hardship didn't even want to speak to me during Thanksgiving. I tried to ask him why he was overreacting about an argument we had 2 months previously, but he just glared at me coldly and told me to keep my proximity. I was highly offended. After a few hours, the Thanksgiving feast was served. To my profound annoyance, Julian Ritz Barr and his equally obnoxious older brother, Leon Ritz Barr, also came for the dinner. I remembered the extreme envy I felt for Julian months ago, and I tried to ignore them as much as possible, which proved to be difficult because they talked loudly all the time. I was seated next to James for the dinner, and after awkwardly sitting next to each other for a few moments, he decided to warm up to me again. As the two of us caught up with each other about our lives, a small inkling of our old friendship ignited like a weak flitter of flame in a candle. It was nice for the brief moment that it lasted. The two of us talked about our usual fantasy scenarios, and joked about how stupid and obnoxious the Ritz Barr brothers were acting. On that same weekend I went home, I got together with Philip and Addison. The three of us went out to a restaurant in LA, and then we headed to the Griffith Park Observatory, just like old times. The last time I was there with the two of them was on that horrible night when Addison told me that no girl will ever want to fuck me. The words were still embedded in my mind, and going to Griffith Park, reminded me of that night. The three of us took a few pictures of us posing at various spots of the observatory, some of which were uploaded onto Facebook, and then we went to the Calabasas Commons to hang out at Barnes & Noble, where I had a few insightful conversations with Addison. Despite our past hostilities, I considered Addison to be one of the most interesting people I knew. I went back to Santa Barbara for a couple of weeks to finish off my 2 classes. In my history class, I kept feeling weak with inferiority as I watched this tall, handsome, blonde jock constantly sit and talk with 2 beautiful girls. There was no way that I couldn't watch it. They were in the middle of the class. I hated that class so much, and I decided to stop attending it until the final exam. Once I took the final exams, I felt glad to be done with those horrifically frustrating college classes. It was just as I had feared. My first actual semester at Santa Barbara City College was an absolute brutal failure. I didn't even have one girl's phone number in my cell phone. Was I going to be a virgin forever? Yes. I frantically wondered as I drove away from my school after taking my exams. I felt like my whole life was over. If I couldn't make it in such a beautiful and opportunistic place like Santa Barbara, then I was doomed to misery and dissatisfaction. I knew that I would rather die than suffer such a fate, and I knew that if it came to that, I would do everything I can to exact revenge before I die. I didn't want it to resort to that. Some part of me was still clung to hope. I didn't want to give up so soon. As I made the long, scenic drive back to my hometown for the holidays, I made a vow to give it all another try when I start my new semester in the spring, and to use the time I had during the winter break to prepare for it as much as I could. My mother told me that she had made plans for me, my sister, and her to go to England for a week. Upon hearing this, I said I didn't want to go. I felt so dissatisfied and defeated, and I didn't want to appear that way to my relatives in England. There was nothing about me that they could be proud of. I felt ashamed of having to face them the way I was. After some persuasion, I agreed to go. I figured that if anything, it would give me a respite from all the pain society has dealt to me, just like our old visits to Jack's beach house in Malibu. Before we left for England, we attended the annual Christmas party at the Lemelsons. I had recently bought a flashy new shirt from Armani Exchange that made me feel particularly fabulous, so I decided to wear it for the party. I loved admiring how awesome I looked in the mirror as I wore it. Wearing flashy new clothes made me feel like a new person. I found it to be a very efficient way to boost my confidence. When I entered the party, I felt gratified when Sue Lemelson, Rob's ex-wife, complimented me on how good I looked. My mother pointed out that it was unusual for Sue to compliment anyone, so I must have made a good impression. James was at the party, of course. He didn't act outwardly cold toward me this time, but there was still a distance between us. During the course of the event, I had my fill of multiple glasses of wine as I casually chatted with James about my insights and life problems. We interacted as if we were still friends, but I could tell things were very different between us. The friendship that we had for so long was dying. When I said goodbye to him that night, it was the last time I ever saw him. After having a quick Christmas celebration at Father's house, I took off for England with my mother and sister. We flew business class on Virgin Atlantic, and since they followed the laws of the UK, I was allowed to drink alcohol on the flight. I took delight in sipping the wine that was served while I enjoyed the relaxing journey. The last time I had been on an airplane since then was the disastrous trip to Morocco when I was 17, and this made for a pleasant contrast. When we landed in England, I felt the sense of wonder that came with being in another country. I hadn't been to my home country of England for almost a decade, and I couldn't believe I was there once again. The decision to go on the trip came so quickly. We stayed at a very nice hotel in the town of Colchester, near where my relatives on my mother's side live, including my grandma Amma. After we unpacked all of our belongings, we went to their house for dinner. I hadn't seen those relatives since our trip to Malaysia. It felt peculiar to see them all again. They were exactly the same as I remembered. It was very heartwarming to see that Grandma Amma had baked her delicious peanut cookies that I loved so much as a child. She had them ready and waiting for me. We visited them again on Christmas Day. They prepared an exquisite lunch, and afterward we exchanged our gifts. I got a bit drunk on that day, as the only thing I could do to pass the time. I tried to relax and forget about all of the pain I had experienced in Santa Barbara. I wished there was something I could talk to my relatives about that would make them proud, but there was nothing interesting or impressive about my life to talk about. I wished that I could show my grandma that I was thriving in Santa Barbara, that I had a girlfriend and I was enjoying a full and healthy life. But no, that is something I was never able to do. I felt so ashamed of myself. My grandma Amma gave me a gift of great value. After we exchanged all of the presents with relatives, Amma presented me with a 22-carat golden necklace. It was very extravagant, and it had been in her possession for a long time. Now it was mine. I wore it instantly and took a great liking to it. From then on, I would wear it in every waking moment. I could have sold it for well over $1,000, but I never did. It was special to me. My favorite part of the trip was the breakfasts at the hotel. The hotel we stayed at was quite luxurious, even by my standards. And the breakfasts, they were absolutely delicious. Every morning, there was a buffet full of delectable choices, such as crispy pork sausage, croissants, bacon, ham, roast potatoes, all kinds of fruit, and much more. On every one of those mornings, I stuffed myself like there was no tomorrow. I was deprived of sex all my life, so the only vice that I could derive a sense of pleasure from was eating delicious food. I took full advantage of that on this trip. My high metabolism prevented me from getting fat from it. Before the trip was over, we all went on a tour through London. We were supposed to visit Grandma Jinx in Smarden on that same day, but Grandma Jinx was in France at the time. We rented a comfortable Mercedes van that could fit 8 people and made a long drive through the English countryside to the capital city of London. By the way, I'm playing Fallout London right now, and it's pretty friggin' great, not gonna lie. I didn't remember much of the city from my previous visits, so this was kind of like a new experience for me. I found the city to be very ugly in most areas, but in contrast, there was some attractive parts that were awash with beautiful architecture and a cultural atmosphere. Once we parked our van, we set out on foot, and sometimes took the underground subway, to explore all of the main attractions of the city. It was cold, dreadfully cold, but I bore it without much concern. Walking through the streets of London at night, especially in Trafalgar Square, and the area around Harrods, was truly breathtaking, or it would have been if I had a beautiful girlfriend by my side to experience it with me. It was the sort of place that one would go with a girlfriend, and I had none. I saw other men being able to experience it with their girlfriends, and the sight soured my whole experience. When we had dinner at a restaurant, I scoffed a big meal and imbibed 2 glasses of wine to make myself feel better during the rest of our tour. My favorite part was walking through the store Harrods. Harrods is a gigantic, renowned luxury designer clothing store. Every facet of it exuded beauty and excessive opulence. It was my type of place. I wished I was rich enough to buy anything I wanted at the store. There were so many choices of fabulous clothing. But alas, I had to settle with buying only one Giorgio Armani shirt. Settled? He can't even enjoy anything. My thoughts exactly. Like, imagine doing such a great vacation, being this much of a miserable cunt about it. If my mother had been wise enough to marry one of those wealthy men she dated, perhaps then I would have been rich enough. Such a pity. Swear to God. Oh my God. Yeah, why can't I get a girlfriend? I know I have the personality of a wet noodle, but... At the end of the night of our London tour, I felt cold and miserable. Walking through that exciting cultural city made me realize that the world was full of wonders to explore, but if I had to do it alone while other men were able to do it with their girlfriends, then what was the point? My life was so mundane and wasteful compared to the lives all those other men lived. They were in heaven, and I was in hell. We took off on the airplane for the journey home. I wondered how my life would have turned out if we never moved to the United States. I saw a lot of beautiful blonde girls in England, just like there were in California. Would I have lived a completely different type of life? Would I have been able to have a girlfriend in England? Would girls in England have been more accepting of a guy like me? Those are questions I will never know the answer to. I spent a few hours recovering from jet lag after we arrived home. On the day after that, it was New Year's Eve. I didn't want a repeat of the previous New Year's, so I spent them alone and miserable in my room. So I decided to go with my father and Sumaya to a party at Anche Twins' house. My father was still friends with them, despite not being friends with the Bubenheims anymore. I wanted to wear something new for the party in order to boost my sense of self-confidence, so I went to Nordstrom and bought a new flashy Hugo Boss shirt, decorated with different hues of blue. I didn't have dinner before the party because I expected dinner to be served there. When we got there, I saw that they didn't offer dinner, only a few party snacks. But there was lots and lots of wine. I also heard from Ange that Vincent was in town, but he was attending a party at Leo Bubenheim's house with all of Leo's popular teenage friends. The mere mention of Leo put me in a bad mood. I couldn't believe that Vincent, too, was now experiencing the pleasures of partying with young people while I sat all alone at an adult's party, sipping my wine in lonely depression. I should be partying with my own friends and my own girlfriends, but I had none. 'Cause you keep pushing them away, you idiot. After I had already gotten quite drunk from having so much wine on an empty stomach, I overheard Anche talking to her friend about how Vincent now had a beautiful girlfriend. She was so proud of her son. That is something my mother was never able to tell her friends about me. I had never had a girlfriend in my whole life. I remember when Vincent used to be a little 9-year-old boy while I was 13. He used to look up to me, and he always watched me play my online games on father's laptop. Now he was 16 and I was 20. He had the pleasure of having a girlfriend, while I've never had one. I was 4 years older than him, but he surpassed me. The envy, rage, and feeling of inferiority I felt almost made me explode with rage right there at the party. The feeling of rage almost made him explode with rage. Wow. A line straight out of the Department of Redundancy department. But instead, I went to the bathroom and vented to myself in the mirror about how much I hate Vincent and wanted to kill him. I drank a lot more wine that night, pouring myself glass after glass. By the time Vincent arrived after his party at Leo's, I greeted him with drunken contempt and drank even more wine. I drank too much. On the next morning, I thanked the heavens that at the end of the party, I had the sense to go to the bathroom to vomit instead of vomiting in front of everyone. That would have been extremely embarrassing. I spent a week at my mother's house before I went back to Santa Barbara to give my life there another try. During this week, I once again met up with Philip and Addison. This outing was much longer than the last. I decided to wear the same Hugo Boss shirt that I wore for New Year's. First, we went on a hike up to the Hollywood sign and watched the glorious sunset. Afterwards, we visited the Getty Museum to admire the brilliant scenery and architecture. While there, I overheard Philip telling Addison that some girls were checking him out. Feeling jealous, I asked Philip if any of those girls checked me out, and he had the audacity to say no, none of them did. I felt so heartbroken that I left the two of them and cried to myself, ruining my whole experience at the museum. How could girls check out Addison but not me? I asked myself repeatedly as I tried to hide my tears from people who walked by me. I walked out to the edge of the grand terrace of the museum, looking out at the city lights of Los Angeles as well as the stars above. In that moment, I fell into a sort of despair-ridden trance, contemplating my reason for existing in this universe and what was in store for my future. It was a very ominous and surreal experience. I calmed down when we left the museum and acted cordial to both of them. I didn't want to spoil the night with my emotional problems. We toured around Hollywood for a bit, and while there I saw lots of young people out and about with their attractive cliques of friends. The sight enraged me for the rest of the night, and we decided to have dinner at a restaurant on Sunset Boulevard. At the restaurant, there were 3 hot model-like girls who sat a few tables down from us. Their bodies looked so sexy and tantalizing that Philip had to go to the bathroom to master. What? He did that in the restaurant? God, what freaks is he surrounding himself with? Wow, that caught me off guard. I was itching to do exactly the same thing, but I didn't want to look like a fool in front of Addison. When I got home, I began to cry because of all the emotions I experienced that night. My mother heard me and showed some concern, as she always did. She was used to me crying a lot, but she never understood why I was so miserable. I always had to explain it to her, that I was a lonely, miserable, unwanted virgin who women treated with disdain, but she could never grasp how severe this was to me. After all, how could she? She was a woman herself. I arrived back in Santa Barbara with a renewed, carefully constructed sense of confidence, especially because of the new collection of designer clothes that I had bought over the winter break. I tried to adopt a sophisticated and suave persona, and made my accent sound more eloquent. I did this out of the hope that girls would find something attractive about it. It was the only persona that truly fit me. I was incapable of being an outgoing, boisterous jock, and I didn't want to be one. I was disgusted by such people, and I was disgusted at how girls were attracted to such filth. I wanted them to be attracted to me. That is how it should be, and I deserved it. During the few weeks before my first day of class, I couldn't really do anything to improve my social situation. I had a fear of going out to the Isla Vista without any friends, and I was hoping to make those friends once college started. Because of this, I became depressed again from all the loneliness. Even though Spencer was there, I felt completely and utterly alone, as the two of us never talked that much. So far, Spencer and I had gotten along quite well despite the fact that we never talked much. An incident happened at the end of January that changed all of this. I one day discovered that Spencer had a girl in his room. I couldn't believe it. The short, chubby guy was able to get a girl into his room before I did. I was so shocked and outraged that I waited outside his room until the girl left so I could get a glimpse of how she looked. To my relief, she wasn't that attractive. What made me more angry is that Spencer gave me a smug look when I saw the girl, even though she was ugly. He had the nerve to feel like he was better than me, just because he managed to get a girl over to the apartment before I did. I confronted him in the kitchen on that same night, telling him that he was foolish to feel proud about having an ugly whore in his room. That made him angry and offended, which is what I wanted. I wanted to offend him as punishment for his insolence. After that incident, the two of us became more and more hostile towards each other. In the beginning of February, my spring semester at Santa Barbara City College began. The classes I registered for were sociology, math, film studies, and English. My English class was an online class, but the other three were normal classes that I attended at the college. Sociology and math were on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and my film class was on Friday mornings. It made for a convenient setup. This was the last chance. I had already failed to change my life in the last semester. I must not fail again. I remembered how hard it was to keep up those two classes in the autumn. The people in them made me feel so miserable. I knew that if the same thing happens in the coming semester, I would end up dropping all of my classes, and if that happened, all of my hope would be doomed. On the morning of the first day, I donned my fabulous Armani exchange shirt and put on my new Gucci sunglasses that my mother gave me. I admired myself in the mirror for a few moments and began to feel a surge of enthusiasm. I wanted everyone to see me looking like that. I was hopeful that some girls would admire me. I said to myself that there was no way I could possibly have trouble with getting girls now. I stopped by at Starbucks to buy a latte and set off for my college with the confidence that would appear as a superior gentleman to all of the students there. I was a superior gentleman. That was what I was born to be, and it was now time to show it to the world. It was a bright sunny day as I ascended the familiar steps up to the beautiful college campus of SBCC. I immediately went to the restroom to look at myself in the mirror a few times, just so that I can feel more assured of myself. Yes, I thought, I am the image of beauty and supremacy. I kept saying it over and over again, as if it was a mantra. When I crossed the renowned bridge that connected the two halves of the campus, I felt as if everyone was admiring me. As I passed groups of girls, I pretended to imagine that they secretly adored and wanted me. After all, that was how it was meant to be. The more I walked around the campus, the more I tried to convince myself that that was the case. My first class was sociology, and I waited until everyone was seated before I walked in. I came in through the front entrance so that everyone could look at my fabulous self. Dude, seriously, please stop saying that. To my utter dismay, I saw that no one turned their head to look at me at all. No girl tilted a head or lifted a pretty little eyebrow at my approach. After all that effort, I was still being treated like I was invisible. The sociology class flew by like a breeze, and my next class was math. In this class, I saw one of the prettiest girls I had ever seen in my life. She was the only pretty girl in the class, and she was absolutely stunning. Of course, she didn't even notice me as I walked in. Her beauty was so intimidating that I couldn't bring myself to sit near her, out of fear of her judgment. As the lecture proceeded, I couldn't help myself from constantly glancing at her, admiring every inch of her enticing body, from her silky blonde hair to her smooth, skinny, slightly tanned legs. The most beautiful thing about her was her face. It was a face that broke my heart the second I laid eyes on it. I wanted her with so much intensity, and I constantly fantasized about her during my masturbation sessions. This was the kind of girl who was always meant to be my girlfriend. This was the girl I was meant to go through college in Santa Barbara with. My life would only have meaning if I could go through college with a girlfriend like her. As I made my way back from school one day during the first week, I was stopped at a stoplight in Isla Vista when I saw two hot blonde girls waiting at the bus stop. I was dressed in one of my nice shirts, so I looked at them and smiled. They looked at me, but they didn't even deign to smile back. They just looked away as if I was a fool. As I drove away, I became very infuriated. It was such an insult. This was the way all girls treated me, and I was sick and tired of it. In a rage, I made a U-turn, pulled up to their bus stop, and splashed my Starbucks latte all over them. Oh my God. The coffee bandit strikes again, ladies and gentlemen. I felt a feeling of spiteful satisfaction as I saw it stain their jeans. Then I quickly speeded away before they could catch my license plate number. How dare those girls snub me in such a fashion? How dare they insult me so? I raged to myself repeatedly. They deserved the punishment I gave them. It was such a pity that my latte wasn't hot enough to burn them. Those girls deserve to be dumped in boiling water for the crime of not giving me the attention and adoration I so rightly deserve. This incident soured my first week of college, but for the sake of all my hopes and dreams, I tried to forget about it. For the month of February, I continued with a trend of attending my college classes and trying to make the most of it. With each passing day, my confidence about how I appeared to everyone started to wane. I didn't make any friends, and I still didn't talk to any girls. By the end of the month, I began to question what I was doing so wrong. I saw obnoxious slobs who dressed in basketball shorts and t-shirts walking with hot girls, and there I was, decked out in Armani, all by myself. It was preposterous. I should have been the one walking with the hot girls. I soon realized that no one cared at all about how well I dressed. No girls admired me. No girls even gave me a second look. I soon found out the name of the beautiful girl in my math class. Her name was Brittany Story. Being the obsessed stalker that I was, I looked her up on Facebook, and what I found shattered my already wounded heart to pieces. She had a boyfriend. Not only that, but her boyfriend was a type of boy I have always hated and despised. A tall, muscular surfer jock with a buzz cut. As I looked at all the pictures of the two of them together, I shivered with pure hatred. I could physically feel the hatred burn through my entire body. I wanted to kill both of them, and I was capable of doing it. Brittany's Story should have been mine, and if I can't have her, no one should. I fantasized about capturing the two of them and stripping the skin off her boyfriend's flesh while making her watch. Why must my life be so full of torment and hatred? I questioned the universe with turmoil roiling inside me. I screamed and cried with anguish that day. My housemate Spencer heard it all, but I didn't care. I dropped my math class immediately after learning that Brittany had a boyfriend. I couldn't look at her beauty anymore. Knowing that some punk was able to enjoy having sex with her every day. I can only imagine how heavenly that guy's life must be. He was in heaven and I was in hell. Shortly after dropping my math class, I decided to drop all of my other classes in a rage. You idiot! There was no point to it anymore. No matter how hard I tried, girls were not attracted to me. What was the point of going through college, getting a degree, and finding some mundane professional job afterwards if I could never experience the pleasure of girls along the way? I didn't want to torture myself with going to college and looking at all those beautiful girls I could never have. Nothing beneficial ever came out of it. There was no hope for me to ever have a desirable college life. My life was devoid of friends, devoid of girls, devoid of sex, and devoid of love. I realized that I will never be able to look back on my youth, the time that I should be having a blast, and feel satisfied about all the happy memories I have. There were no happy memories, only misery, loneliness, rejection, and pain. The only thing I could do was even the score. I wanted to make everyone else suffer just as they made me suffer. I wanted revenge. When I dropped my college classes, I crossed a threshold that I knew existed, but I never actually believed I would cross. It completely ended all hope I had of living a desirable life in Santa Barbara. I realized that I would be a virgin forever, condemned to suffer rejection and humiliation at the hands of women because they don't fancy me, because their sexual attractions are flawed. They are attracted to the wrong type of male. I always mused to myself that I would rather die than suffer such an existence, and I knew that if it came to that, I would exact my revenge upon the world in the most catastrophic way possible. At least then, I could die knowing that I fought back against the injustice that has been dealt to me. Excuse me. Ever since my life took a very dark turn at the age of 17, I often had fantasies of how malevolently satisfying it would be to punish all the popular kids and young couples for the crime of having a better life than me. I dreamed of how sweet it would be to torture or kill every single young couple I saw. However, as I said previously in this story, I never thought I would actually go through with these drastic desires. I had hope inside me that I could one day have a happy life. It was only when I first moved to Santa Barbara that I started considering the possibility of having to carry out a violent act of revenge as the final solution to dealing with all the other injustices that I've had to face at the hands of women and society. I came up with a name for this after I saw all the good-looking young couples walking around my college and in the town of Isla Vista. I named it the Day of Retribution. He said the line, everybody. It would be a day in which I exact my ultimate retribution and revenge on all the hedonistic scum who enjoyed lives of pleasure that they don't deserve. If I can't have it, I will destroy it. I will destroy all women because I can never have them. I will make them all suffer for rejecting me. I will arm myself with deadly weapons and wage a war against all women and the men they are attracted to. And I will slaughter them like the animals they are. If they won't accept me among them, then they are my enemies. They showed me no mercy, and in turn I will show them no mercy. The prospect will be so sweet, and justice will ultimately be served. And of course, I would have to die in the act to avoid going to prison. That is when I realized that this threshold existed, and if I crossed it, I will have to carry out this day of retribution. It has remained stagnant in the back of my mind ever since until this point. After dropping my spring classes at Santa Barbara City College, I knew that the day of retribution was now very possible. I even wrote about it in my diary, but I later tore out the pages because I feared someone might find them. A shiver ran through me, realizing how twisted my world had become. He said the other line! That I would have to resort to doing something that I would consider unthinkable a few years ago. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to live. Thinking about the day of retribution made me feel trapped. I wanted a way out. No, you definitely wanted to do it. Stop. After some deep contemplation, I had the revelation that the day of retribution wasn't the only way I could make up for all the suffering I've had to experience. If I could somehow become a multi-millionaire at a young age, then my lifestyle would instantly become better than most people my age. I would be able to get revenge on my enemies just by living above them and lording over them. That was a form of happy, peaceful revenge, and it became my only hope. Once again, I started to desperately ponder over ways I could become extremely wealthy at a young age. It was my only way out. This was when I realized that wealth was the only way I could lose my virginity. The only way I could have a beautiful girlfriend I know I deserve. Due to all of my past experiences, it is evident that girls are not attracted to me as a person. They are repulsed by me. The only way I could possibly become worthy of their love and attraction is if I became wealthy. I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke gamers, am I right, fellas? Fuck. In the beginning of March, I went home in a sullen and disturbed mood. I did my best to hide it from my parents. I also had to hide the fact that I dropped all of my college classes, and I kept up the pretense that I was still attending college, talking to my father about my lectures and so forth. The weekend that I visited home was quite an eventful one, and I had been looking forward to it for some time. On Sunday, March 11th, 2012, when I went with my mother and sister to a private, exclusive Katy Perry concert, and on March 12th, 2012, I went with my father and Sumaya to the red carpet premiere of The Hunger Games. The invitation to the private Katy Perry concert was actually meant for Rob Lemelson, as the concert was held for extremely wealthy people who were clients of NetJets, a private jet company. Rob had no interest in such things, so he gave the tickets to my mother. I was eager to go because I loved attending exclusive events. It made me feel special. For most of the time spent at the concert, I just walked around and ate food at the buffet tables while everyone waited for Katy Perry to perform. There was upbeat music playing the entire time, and a lot of wealthy families with their kids attended. Every family there must have had a net worth of at least $20 million to be able to hire private jets. I tried to pretend as if I was part of a wealthy family. I should be. That was the life I was meant to live. I would be. If only my damnable mother had married into wealth instead of being selfish. Oh my God, the lack of self-awareness in that statement alone is insane. If only my failure of a father had made better decisions with his directing career instead of wasting his money on that stupid documentary. Ooh, the documentary. I talked about it in my Monkey Jones iceberg. Oh my God. And ooh, man, that's a whole thing in itself. I couldn't help but feel a bitter form of envy at all of the rich kids at the concert. They grew up in their lavish mansions, indulged in excessive opulence, and will never have to worry about anything in their pleasurable, hedonistic lives. I would take great pleasure in watching all of those rich families burn alive. Looking at all of them really drilled into my mind the importance of wealth. Wealth is one of the most important defining factors of self-worth and superiority. I hated and envied all of those kids for being born into wealth, while I had to struggle to find a way to claim wealth for myself. I had to be ruthless and do whatever it takes to attain such wealth. After all, it was my only hope of ever being worthy of getting a girlfriend and living the life of gratification that I desire. The red carpet premiere of The Hunger Games was an even more exclusive event. The reason we got in was because my father was friends with the director, Gary Ross. My father even contributed to the film as a second unit director. Gary Ross had been coming over to Father's house for dinner quite frequently in the past few months. When he told me about The Hunger Games, I had never heard about it before, so I decided to read the books that the movie would be based on. It was quite an enjoyable story, and I became a fan. At the same time, my stepmother Sumaya was in the process of filming a French reality TV series called Les Vraies Housewives. Her status as a reality TV star, coupled with my father's important association with Gary Ross, enabled us all to attain VIP tickets at the red carpet premiere, including admittance to walk on the red carpet itself, which was actually a black carpet in a literal sense. Sumaya was on a French TV series? Really? That's news to me. I knew a lot about, this going in, but not that. That's interesting. I didn't own any suits, but I wore my extravagant Hugo Boss shirt, which I thought looked elegant enough to walk on the black carpet. As we were lining up for our walk on the black carpet, some dumb bitch of a security guard had the audacity to question, who the hell are these people? This made me so enraged that I almost said, we're people who are more important than you ugly cunt. Fucking got him. But Sumaya's publicist calmly informed her of our invitation. We then proceeded to walk across the long black carpet as cameras flashed at us from one side, and a crowd of pathetic fans who reminded me of sheep cheered from the other side. I felt extremely gratified for walking on the black carpet with Father and Sumaya, and I cockily smiled at all the stupid fans who had to remain on the side, rubbing it right in their faces. There were some actors and celebrities on the carpet with us, and the paparazzi yelled at me a few times to get out of the way as they were taking pictures of some cunt actress. I discreetly gave those paparazzi pigs my middle finger. Elliot Rodger would not move aside for a stupid, good-for-nothing, overglorified actress, whoever the fuck she was. I didn't see. We all walked through the chaos until we finally reached the theater where the movie was being screened, called the Nokia Theater. It was one of the biggest theaters I'd ever seen, able to seat hundreds of people. At the entrance, Father and I greeted Jack Ross, the son of Gary Ross. He was a spoiled brat of a 16-year-old, and to my embarrassment, he stood taller than me. I immediately hated him on sight. He was living the life I should be living, if only my father had become as successful a director as Gary Ross. I equally hated his repugnant friends, who ended up sitting in front of me and partially blocking my view for the entire movie. Throughout the whole film, I had to fight the urge not to splash my drink all over the little shitheads in a vehement rage. They spoiled it for me, and it was quite a good movie, too. The movie was entertaining, but my favorite part of this premiere was the after party. Yes, we were invited to the after party, where only the most important guests could attend. I felt so special as I handed my VIP tickets to the guards outside, gaining admittance. The party was extravagant, with buffet tables set up in every corner serving exquisite delicacies. I excitedly went from plate to plate, helping myself to all the food. Father and Sumaya went off to socialize with Gary Ross and his entourage of producers. I didn't know anyone there, of course, so I just spent time with my sister Georgia. A few moments into the party, I ran into an old face. He noticed me first and called out my name, saying, "Is your name Elliot?" He was none other than Ashton Moyo from Pinecrest Middle School. I hadn't seen him since 8th grade. He was now in the process of starting a career in acting, and he had a small part in the movie. Huh. I actually read about this beforehand, but I didn't expect to run into him at the after-party. Ashton's sister, Monette Moyo, was nowhere to be seen. I suppose the bitch wasn't invited. Ha! I remembered all the pain she caused me during my 8th grade year at Pinecrest. I tried to act as cool and confident as I possibly could with Ashton, though I felt intimidated. He was one of the most popular kids at Pinecrest, and now he was becoming an actor, one of the most attractive careers a man can have. I assumed he had probably slept with countless beautiful girls. Damn him. I had a brief conversation with him before trying to leave his presence as fast as I could. I didn't want him to find out how pathetic my life was. While roaming around the after-party, I bore witness to many successful young men who pranced in with their hot model girlfriends. Some of them were even actors my own age, stars of the movie. I had a particular burning hatred for the actor Alexander Ludwig, who I saw sitting arrogantly on a couch as people crowded around him in adoration. I hated everything about him. His golden blonde hair, his tall muscular frame, his cocky masculine face. That boy could get any girl he wanted. His life was completely opposite from my own. If only I could get a taste of how he lived for just one day. As I saw all these successful young men with their beautiful dates, I became even more convinced about how important money and status was in attaining a desirable life of love and sex. It made me even more obsessed with my goal of becoming wealthy at a very young age. That was the only way to live life. The whole premiere, from the red carpet to the film to the after party, was an extraordinary experience, and I will never forget it. I still felt very bitter that I wasn't able to bring a girl with me as a date. The majority of men at the event had a date with them, and I felt so pathetic for not having a date. If only a girl at my college had been attracted to me, I would have gladly brought her to the premiere as my date. When I returned to Santa Barbara, I realized I had absolutely no obligations. Since I had dropped all my college classes, I had all the time in the world. I wanted to make use of that time as much as I could. Frantically, I tried to come up with ways to find some sort of idea to make millions of dollars. Some would say this was folly, but it has been done before. Many people have succeeded in coming up with an idea and making millions or even billions instantly. I was an extraordinary, magnificent person destined for great things. If other people could do it, why not me? It was my destiny, my whole purpose on this world. For the next week or so, I spent time meditating in my room, trying to come up with ways to get rich. I could either invent something, start a great business idea, or go back to my original idea I had of writing an epic fantasy story that could be made into a movie. That reminded me of the reason why I gave up on that idea in the first place. The amount of time it would take to achieve success from such a prospect. I was so desperate that I needed to do something right then and there. Well, it was a matter of life and death. If I couldn't make it, I had nothing to live for. After a lot of deep thinking, I couldn't come up with anything. Was I doomed to fail at everything? I began to feel hopeless until I saw the current jackpot for the Mega Millions lottery. It was rising very high in the month of March. I had saved up a lot of money at the time, so I had enough to spare on lottery tickets, so I didn't go under $5,000, which I wanted to keep as my minimum amount of savings just in case of an emergency, or in case I would have to carry out the day of retribution. As it so happened, I had well over $6,000 saved up at the time, from all of the allowance, Christmas money, and birthday money that my parents and grandmothers had been sending me. For the first time since moving to Santa Barbara, I began to take a serious interest in playing the lottery again. Ooh boy, we're getting to the lottery arc of this anime. I believe that it was destiny for me to win the Mega Millions lottery, particularly this very jackpot. People win the lottery every single month, so why not me? I was meant to live a life of significance and extravagance. I was meant to win this jackpot. It was destiny. For the first few drawings I played, I spent $50 to $100 on tickets, but to my profound frustration, I still didn't win, and the jackpot kept rising. This only increased my enthusiasm. I started to picture a whole new perfect life for myself after I won. I imagined buying a beautiful, opulent mansion with an extravagant view, and acquiring a collection of supercars which I would use specifically to attract beautiful girls into my life. I planned to go back to college once I had bolstered myself with all this wealth, and lord myself over all of the other students there, finally fulfilling my dream of being the coolest and most popular kid at school. As I sat meditating in my room, I imagined the ecstasy I would feel as scores of beautiful girls look at me with admiration as I drive up to college in a Lamborghini. Such an experience would make up for everything. I had to win this jackpot. As the jackpot reached over $200 million, I had spent more of my saved money on lottery tickets, but I still didn't win. I knew that the more I spent on tickets, the higher chance I had of winning. I was so desperate to live a satisfying life that I spent $400 on tickets when the jackpot hit $290 million. When I failed to win that, I spent $500 on tickets when it reached $363 million. And I still didn't win it on that one. And then the jackpot reached a number that I never imagined it would. $656 million. I was astounded and filled with a feverish enthusiasm of hope and desire. This was the highest lottery jackpot in history. I knew I was always destined for great things. This must be it. I was destined to be the winner of the highest lottery jackpot in existence. I knew right then and there that this jackpot was meant for me. Who else deserved such a victory? I had been through so much rejection, suffering, and injustice in my life that this was to be my salvation. With my whole body filled with feverish hope, I spent $700 on lottery tickets for this drawing. As I spent this money, I imagined... Hold on, I'm getting a text, sorry. I imagined all the amazing sex I would have with a beautiful model girlfriend that I would have once I became a man of wealth. Alright, one sec, just gonna respond to this. Okay. After the ultimate and fateful drawing, I waited 3 days to check the result. I was too anxious about what I will see. The result would determine the fate of my whole life. For those 3 days, I meditated alone in my room, trying to convince myself that I was the winner. I held all of the tickets in my hand, excitedly pondering over which one was the true winning ticket. There were many times during this period where I was about to check the result, but canceled the web page in the last second out of fear of what I might see. The prospect of finding out that I lost was devastating. On the fourth day, I decided to just go through with it. The result was already decided, and the amount of time it took for me to check it wouldn't change anything. I had to see the truth. My heart was beating rapidly as I loaded up the web page to the Mega Millions website. What I saw crushed all of my hope completely. My whole body shivered with horrific agony. I didn't win. 3 people won that jackpot, and it was split between them. But none of those 3 people were me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was certain I would be the winner. It was destiny. Fate. But no, the world continued to give me no justice or salvation whatsoever. I sank into one of the worst depressions of my life. It was spring break, and while all other young boys my age were going off to vacation with their attractive friends, I was feeling miserable and alone in my room because I failed to win the lottery jackpot that would enable me to rise above them all. I was so depressed that even when my mother came up to Santa Barbara with my sister and her friends for a short day trip, I refused to see them. Wow, what a douche. For the next month, I barely left my room. I was completely and utterly at the end of all hope. My life is over, I thought. Without that wealth, what was there to live for in the future? I still couldn't believe I didn't win. I kept thinking about the heavenly life I would be living if I had won. I was certain of my victory, right at the moment of the drawing. Instead, it turned into a crushing defeat. Just like everything else in my life, everything I had tried to do in the past, ever since childhood, had been a failure. It was very hard to feel good about myself anymore. I spent all of my time drifting aimlessly, doing nothing with my time except brooding over my fate. I didn't want to think about anything. I could barely breathe from the stifling loneliness. All of my energy had been sapped out of me. I'm just gonna bookmark here and then jump ahead to see how much more until 21 years old. Okay, we're almost done. Cool. In the month of April, James Ellis officially ended the friendship between us. James hadn't contacted me at all since Lemelson's Christmas party, and I felt extremely offended by this. For the first few months of 2012, I had been trying to contact him, demanding to know why he continued to act so cold and distant to me. I thought that after we spoke with each other at the Lemelsons, things would get better between us. I was dead wrong. I got a hold of him on the phone in February, and he said a few words to me before quickly making an excuse to hang up. A month later, I messaged him on Facebook to tell him how rude he was on the phone, and in April I received a response from him. He blatantly said he didn't want to be friends anymore. He didn't even deign to tell me why. After he said the fateful words, he refused to talk to me ever again. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. It was the ultimate betrayal. I thought he was the one friend I had in the whole world who truly understood me, who truly understood my views and the reasons why I thought the way I did about the world. I confided everything to him because I thought we were on the same page. To be betrayed in such a manner wounded me deeply, though I never admitted it to anyone. On the day of betrayal, I thought back on our entire friendship. James Ellis was my oldest friend. I remember the first time I met him, as we kicked dust together as first graders at Topanga Elementary School. I remembered all the good times I spent at his various houses in the Palisades, trading Pokemon cards when we were little, our brief interest in skateboarding, playing World of Warcraft together as teenagers, all our walk through the Palisades town center. He was a big part of my life. And now he was gone, faded away into memory. I didn't have any friends left anymore, no friends in the entire world. I didn't want to see Philip and Addison after I cried in front of them at the Getty Museum. I was completely and utterly alone, in the darkest pit of despair, and in that pit I withered in agony. My deep depression lasted well into the summer. My life stayed stagnant and miserable, and my hatred towards everyone, especially women, for depriving me of a happy life only grew stronger. I questioned myself over and over about what was going to happen to me now. I didn't want it to resort to having to exact ultimate vengeance. I didn't want to die. I wanted something to live for. There had to be a way for me to become wealthy. I continued to see it as the only way I would ever have a beautiful girlfriend and lose my virginity. My ultimate dream was to experience the pleasures of love and sex with girls once I become rich enough to be worthy of them. And then I would settle down with a beautiful girlfriend and have beautiful children with her, whom I would raise up to live in a much better life than the one I've had to suffer through. That would be the most satisfying vengeance against all those young people who thought they were better than me. If I could show them that I lived such a life, my purpose on this world would be complete. To see the look on all of their faces once I've risen above them, I couldn't imagine anything sweeter. So I happened to come across a book called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Oh God, he went into those retarded self-help books. This book filled me with hope for the next few months. It was very similar to The Secret, the book I read over a year ago. Oh yeah, that's right, he did this. This is not the first time he did this, I remember now. Sorry guys, it's been a while. And it had the same effect on me. It gave an even more in-depth view on the law of attraction. A year previously, I had given up on believing in such a concept, but when I read through this book thoroughly, I desperately convinced myself to give it a try. I wanted to believe the theory could work. I needed something to live for. And we just passed the 2-hour mark. We're almost done, don't worry. I began to visualize myself winning the lottery. I did this throughout the month of June. After continuous analyzing and contemplation, I concluded that winning the lottery was the only way I could become wealthy at a young age. Oh my God. Oh wow, yeah. And thus it was the only way to enjoy the rest of my youth. If I didn't have a satisfying youth, I would be bitter and miserable for the rest of my life, but of course that would never happen. If it came to that, then I would have to carry out the day of retribution. Indeed, it was the only way I could attain any sort of wealth at my age. I had no talents, so it was impossible for me to become a professional actor, musician, or athlete. Those were usually the ways that young people acquired such money. I could invent something or start a business just like Mark Zuckerberg did with Facebook, but the chances of me achieving such a thing were the same chances I had of winning this lottery anyway. I didn't even have the skills of a computer programmer. You know, that could have been a reason why you were going to college, to gain those skills, but no. Just like everything else, you expect things to be handed to you. After reading this book, I wanted to believe that there was some sort of supernatural power that I could harness to change reality as I saw fit. For the months of June and July, I took frequent walks around Gersh Park in Goleta, dreaming and visualizing about winning the lottery. I affirmed that once the jackpot rose to over $100 million, I would buy a ticket and that ticket would be the winner. For all the months of summer, people kept winning the lottery and the jackpot kept resetting, but I was so desperate that I still clung to my faith that I would soon win. On one of the days in July, when I was roaming around Gersh Park, a group of popular college kids arrived to play kickball in the fields. They all looked like typical fraternity jocks, tall and muscular, the kind of guys I've hated and envied my whole life. With them came a flock of beautiful blonde girls, and they looked like they were having so much fun playing together. One of the girls did a handstand on the grass, and her sexy bare stomach showed as her shirt hung down. All the girls were scantily clad. Rage boiled inside me as I watched those people who thought they were better than me enjoying their pleasurable lives together. The rage was so intense that I couldn't take it. I was insulted too much. I couldn't leave them without getting some form of revenge, so I drove to the nearby Kmart, bought a super soaker, filled it up with orange juice that I bought at the same store, and drove back to the park. Oh boy. We're doing this again. They were still there, having the time of their lives, and I wanted to ruin it for them. I wanted to ruin their fun just like they ruined mine, as they would never accept me among them. I screamed at them with rage as I sprayed them with my super soaker. When the boys started to yell and chase after me, I quickly got into my car and drove away. I was giddy with ecstatic, hate-fueled excitement. I wish I could spray boiling oil at the foul beasts. They deserve to die horrible, painful deaths just for the crime of enjoying a better life than me. I drove to a secluded area of the parking lot in the Camino Real marketplace nearby, my heart beating rapidly. After I'd calmed down, I was overcome with the worry and fear that I would get in trouble for it. I wondered with panic if there were any cameras at the park that would have caught me in the act. Oh no, the Super Soaker Man. Oh my god. The worry lasted for a few days, but eventually I became relieved that no trouble came out of it. My mother and sister came up to Santa Barbara for my 21st birthday. I didn't want them to come up, but they came anyway. I suppose my mother felt sorry for me that I would be alone on my 21st birthday. And it's true. I would have been alone. Isn't that such a sad thing to contemplate? Being alone on my 21st birthday? Most other men have huge drinking parties with their friends and girlfriends to mark their passing over the legal age limit to drink alcohol. I've read stories online of how exciting other men's 21st birthdays are. I had absolutely no one to celebrate mine with. Having no friends, the only people who even wished me a happy birthday were my immediate family members. When my mother and sister arrived in Santa Barbara, they wanted to meet up at a restaurant in State Street, but that prospect horrified me. State Street was filled with young couples walking around arm in arm as they went out on their blissful dates. I was already tortured at the fact that I was now a 21-year-old virgin. I didn't want to torture myself anymore. I looked online for a quieter restaurant that we could meet at, a place where young couples most likely wouldn't know about. I came across a secluded Japanese restaurant in Montecito named Sakana. I suggested this to my mother, and since it was my birthday, she gave me the choice of where to eat. I met the two of them outside the restaurant as they were waiting to be seated. I was in a sullen and depressed mood. Turning 21 as a kissless virgin was indeed a dark day. How pathetic it was to be 21 and still a virgin while kids were having sex at the age of 14. The unfairness of life on this world is staggeringly horrific. The restaurant Sakana turned out to be a very good choice. They served the most delicious Japanese food I have ever tasted in my life. They had so many creative dishes to try, and I ordered so many meals that the bill reached over $200. I eagerly devoured all of it, compensating for my sorrows with delectable food. My mother loved the restaurant as well, and she had been to all of the best Japanese restaurants in LA. With her various wealthy boyfriends, she proclaimed that Sakana topped all of them. From this point onwards, it would become a tradition for us to eat here whenever my mother came up to visit me. After dinner, we went to the Starbucks in Montecito, and I washed my exquisite meal down with a nice warm latte. I never explored much of Montecito before, and I found it to be a lovely, beautiful place. It reminded me of Calabasas, though much quieter and more conservative. I figured I'd be spending a lot of time there in the future. And with that, we will end it for today. We are on page 107 of 137, so there are 30 pages left. I see us getting 1 or 2 more streams out of this, depending on how long these next chapters drag out. With that, if anyone in the chat has any thoughts, I will read them and respond. God. This final stretch is probably going to be the longest one, not going to lie. My brain hurts. Yeah, mine too. That was definitely a roller coaster. We went to the racial stuff, to him dumping coffee and orange juice on people, to the constant whining and holding himself up in his room and then wondering, why can't I get a girlfriend? To just the astounding lacks of self-awareness. It's absolutely insane. My God. But yeah, 30 pages left. We're in the home stretch. We really are. There's just 21 and 22 years of age to go. And I think that'll be it because, you know, he was 22 when he carried out the Day of Retribution. So yeah, we are pretty much in the home stretch. Like 1 or maybe 2 streams left. Oh boy, I'm excited to actually finish something for once. And after so long, I know it's been a while since I've streamed, but Yeah, like that. This is wild. But yeah, I'll keep this open for a couple more minutes to see if there's any more comments, and if not, then I guess I will end it. Wonder what I should read next. Like at some point I gotta do like another stream of something, but you know, not a manifesto, obviously, but maybe I could like read like really bad Tumblr fan fiction or something. That could probably be really funny. Maybe I could read My Immortal. I don't know. Sonic High School. I don't know. All right, no one seems to be responding, so I guess that'll be it for this episode. Yes. Yeah, totally. All right. And with that, I guess I will catch y'all in the next one. Will it be the final episode? I don't know. We'll see. Find out on the next episode of Elliot Ball Z. I don't know. Yeah. Uh have a chill one. Peace.